allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Beagle.
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Present.
Councilmember Behrman.
Present.
Councilmember Gotchel.
Here.
Councilmember Grenlin Fox.
Here.
Councilmember Sharp.
Present.
Councilmember Smiley.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you. Changes or additions to the agenda tonight is presented. City Manager.
Your Honor, we just had the updated agenda that was previously circulated amongst council and also posted on the city website, where we added a presentation regarding a tri-bar discharge to the Wixom wastewater treatment plant.
Very good. Any from the dais? Councilmember Gotchel.
Thank you. I'd like to offer 2 items of new business. The first being discussion surrounding the county potential upcoming vote relating to countywide forest transportation. And then the second I would like to offer is a discussion about the use of carcinogens and toxic chemicals in manufacturing and industrial settings within city limits.
All right. Any others? All right, seeing none, we'll come up to our first item of order tonight is presentation. The first item under presentation tonight is proclamation for Nancy Dingle Day. Nancy has been a long-time Wixom resident and probably has done more for this city and knows more about this city than any other person in the city. So I'd like to recognize her this time. So if you want to step up. We'll trip on the wires that way. Okay. All right. I'll read the proclamation that we have for Nancy tonight. It's, whereas from the very beginning of her Wixom citizenship in 1968, Nancy Dingle Day began to make history by devoting herself to serving her community. And whereas one of the 5 founding members of the library board formed in 1973, Nancy Dingle Day was called to act. And whereas on November 6, 1979, Nancy Dingle Day began her 17-year career on Wixom City Council, serving as a council member and deputy mayor. And whereas, as a leader on City Council, Nancy Dingle Day initiated a land acquisition plan for Wixom to buy vacant property, ultimately creating our city's beloved habitat. And whereas, inspired by the sidewalks at her childhood home in Oak Park, Illinois, Nancy Dingle Day initiated a plan for sidewalks in Wixom. And whereas Nancy Dingle Day continued to serve and represent Wixom by being part of various city boards, commissions, and committees, including but not limited to the Bicentennial Committee, Personal Advisory Committee, Wage and Salary Committee, Economic Development Task Force, Beautification Committee, Historic Preservation Committee, Vice President of Wixom Municipal League 1989, Vice Chairman of SIMCOG, Chairman of OLSHA, and whereas Nancy Dingle Day was appointed in 1993 to serve as an Oakland County Commissioner in District 11 and went on to earn election and serve that capacity for 10 years. And throughout her knowledge and continued devotion and dedication to Wixom and the entire Lakes area, Nancy Dingle Day conveys an enormous amount of value in her current role as President of the Wixom Historical Society. And whereas Nancy Dingle Day has long been a pillar of our community, an asset to the city of Wixom, and a true friend and good neighbor. And now, therefore, on behalf of City Council and residents of Wixom, I, Patrick Beagle, do hereby, in recognition of her service as an extension of our appreciation of her job well done, present Nancy Dingle Day with this proclamation of appreciation on this 9th day of August, 2022.
You know, I know many of you would say she's speechless. You know, but I would say through the years, Wixom has meant so much to me, and through all of those efforts, not only through volunteerism, but through the wonderful staff from the city, we were able to accomplish what we have today, which in and of itself is something to be very grateful for. And I hope you enjoy living here, because in 1965, it didn't look like this. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm really honored. Take it away. And since I just got a clear health thing yesterday, I guess maybe there might be a couple of more years worth.
We're going to take a few minutes break and have a little celebration. We have cake. And
Oh,
and
thank you.
Yes. So, yeah, so we'll take.
Oh my God. And
For Master Sheriff.
ask
Nancy, and it started when Annette and I moved back from Germany here to this little village of Wixom, and I was a Birkenstock wearing, German speaking guy, and got on Parks and Rec. And Nancy and I had the pleasure of being on a committee for the Gibson House, and we met Francis Gibson and went through all the inventory in the barns and everything. And then the Habitat came, and then the sidewalk project. I think without Nancy's vision of the land acquisition, a lot of what we have today in the city wouldn't be here. So I want to thank her and hope we have a few more years of working together as well.
Anybody else? All right, so now we'll move on to this second item under the presentation agenda tonight, and that is the Tri-Bar untreated discharge to the Wixom wastewater treatment plant informal update. City Manager Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And just a reminder for everybody, make sure we talk loud so the representative from Eagle can hear us online. Thank you.
So we're going to go over a pretty to-the-point PowerPoint presentation. It's going to cover some of the facts as we know them as to what's happened with this event where the Tri-Bar Company in the city of Wixom discharged up to 10,000 gallons of what was perceived to be untreated wastewater known to contain hexavalent chromium, which is a known carcinogenic to the city's wastewater treatment plant. With that discharge beginning sometime over the preceding weekend, we were notified at about 4 p.m. on August 1st that that's what we were dealing with. At about the same time, Tri-Bar also notified various different people at the state level, regulators at the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. Also on August 1st, the city immediately went on to inform Eagle ourselves of that discharge by Tri-Bar into the city's wastewater treatment plant. At the same time, roughly speaking, the city immediately issued a cease and desist order, which is still in place to require that Tri-Bar stops any further discharges from their industrial operations at their plant number 5. And that's what the source of that discharge was. Also on that same day, employees of the contract operator as well as city employees began to take action to do mitigation and containment of that discharge to our wastewater treatment plant. We diverted the wastewater treatment plant discharge to a holding tank and later to a ditch on our wastewater treatment plant property until that storage was no longer available, in other words, until it was filled. We also, via loan from a neighboring community, borrowed equipment that was necessary to allow us to basically double batch or double process the wastewater that we had, because it was our understanding that we would be able to have a better impact on reducing the amount of any kind of contamination that would be passed into the Huron River watershed with that double treatment. So that all happened on the first day on August 1st. On August 2nd, the city began to take samples and submit samples, began to submit samples to outside testing agencies to get a handle on what the nature and extent of the contamination of those samples would be. Later that day on August 2nd as well, Eagle and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services published a notice for Huron River water between North Wixom Road and Kensington Road with instructions to, until further notice, avoid contact with water in that area, avoid using that water in that area on plants or lawns for purposes like watering plants or sprinkling lawns, and then also continue to avoid eating fish from the Huron River waters, which was already in place because of the PFAS issue that happened around 2018. Also on August 2nd, the city initiated a police department inquiry with Tri-Bar as to the cause of the discharge. The next day on August 3rd, when we had yet to really have the opportunity to have any interactions with any Tri-Bar employees from the police department standpoint, our city police department was contacted by state investigators, and the city agreed to transfer the Tri-Bar investigation of that discharge to the state. Also on August 3rd, we had the first 2 samples that were processed by, again, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy come back. One was taken from Norton Creek, which is right outside of the Wixom wastewater treatment plant, the first spot where the discharge from the plant would go, and also from the Huron River, with both of those results coming back as non-detecting of hexavalent chromium, which was what the issue was at the beginning of the event. So that brought us through mostly till today. We do have some other additional information, which I'm going to go over later in the presentation with some additional testing results. But for now, we wanted to bring forward someone else to assist with the presentation. I mentioned FVOP, which is Police and Bend Brick Operations. Rich Grant is an employee with FVOP that's been on top of this situation since it began. And he's going to cover the next slide, which basically just covers a map, if you will, of our process, and then he's going to provide some other information related to the hexavalent chromium and other information that would be helpful for people.
Very good. Good evening, all. Good evening. So my name is Rich Grant. I'm a professional engineer. I've been working in wastewater treatment since 1984 and with electrical later since 1986. Can you hear me okay? I'll get a little closer. So this sort of a release is shown in the upper left from Tri-Bar, an electroplater using hard chrome plating, which uses hexavalent chrome. This used to be more common. Since then, there have been so many different improvements in wastewater treatment and containment and control that human error is rare now, but still does occur, and it did occur sometime over that weekend of July 31st. July 30th. And so that release was initially estimated to be many more pounds than it was later found to be. And the city manager is going to tell you more about that detail. But what I'd like to do is kind of walk through from upstream to downstream where that hexavalent chromium traveled and what we call fate in transport. In the upper left is the indication of the industry, Tri-Bar. And then there's an arrow in gray, which is indicating a low oxygen condition in the sewer as the wastewater goes downhill in the sewer to a pump station, a city pump station. And that pump station, it is then pumped up to the treatment plant. And during that time, the vast majority of the hexavalent chromium was converted to trivalent chromium. The significance of this is the hexavalent one has a very high toxicity and carcinogenic nature, and trivalent chromium does not. So this is actually one of the first treatment processes that Tri-Bar normally completes at their place without the error, without the spill. And so this happened in the sewer system and in the pump station where there was a low oxygen environment and sulfide present. And then into the screening, and from the screening into the oxidation ditch. At that time, one oxidation ditch was in active use and the other was under construction for some normal repairs and upgrades. And so there was actually an open tank, a large open tank there, and there was also another large open tank back in what we call the equalization tank, the south equalization tank. So we had some assets at the time. The staff noticed on Monday morning that the wastewater was different. It was coming in the door, they collect samples, they paid close attention, and it was low pH, meaning acidic, and it had a bit of a tint to it, neither which is normal. And so they started making immediate changes to the process and stopping certain processes and watching it closely to make sure that the biology would survive. And then, as you see, then what's brown-colored oxidation ditches, those are aerated. That then goes to the clarifiers where the solids are separated. These biosolids are actually what's doing the biological treatment. But it turns out the chrome, the hexavalent chrome is gone. We're now dealing with trivalent chrome plus 3 charge. And that adheres to the solids, the biosolids that are in those oxidation ditches, in particular the one that's active, the east ditch. And so those are then clarified and taken out of the water in the clarifiers. So the clear water that exits the clarifiers is essentially very, very low in chrome at that point. So your wastewater treatment plant and treatment plant staff were able to remove the vast majority of the chrome in your standard equipment. And as manager mentioned, operating it a little bit differently. We ended up double treating. We ended up pumping the effluent from the blue features here, the EQ basin, we pumped it back around for a second contact, for a second treatment, because the chromium tends to soar to the surface of the biosolids. We gave it another shot as we pumped it around for double treatment. So that happened. And then filtration, UV disinfection, and out to the creek. And so the plant itself and the operations did a great job in modifying, stopping any sort of removal of the solids from the facility. The solids still remain there and have ever since the incident, because the solids are where the chrome is now adhered to. So that's a quick look at the facility and what happened upstream to downstream. And I'll be available for questions here.
Yeah, just to make it clear, we're going to have an opportunity for mayor and council to ask questions, as well as people from the audience to ask questions. The second part of it, we're going to have to take part in it, just to make it easiest for our processes. The way the council meeting is normally constructed is we're going to have you immediately following the time we close out this presentation. We'll have one item that will be quickly handled, which is approval of our regular council meeting minutes, and then it'll go to the call to the public after that. So you'll have a chance to talk immediately after the presentation, just with a few seconds delay in between. So I just want to make that clear now. The other thing that I wanted to make mention of is the mayor mentioned about making sure a representative of the Eagle could hear us. We have Teresa Seidel, who's with us by remote means, because that was the only way that she could participate. So she's going to be available as well in case there's anything that needs to be clarified as we proceed. So Mr. Grant mentioned something about the initial estimates of the amount of hexavalent chromium being much larger than we were ultimately dealing with, and that's a classic understatement, basically, and he left that up to me to flesh that out. So on our next slide, which we have on the screen right now, we had an investigation with Tri-Bar and Eagle. We're on the wrong page. Where am I? I flipped it over. There we go. My problem. On the initial release into the internal drain at Tri-Bar, there was an estimate of there was a tank that was involved at Tri-Bar that held up to 10,000 gallons of wastewater. And because of what we didn't know and what we had to assume at the time, there was up to 8,000 pounds of hexavalent chromium that would be involved in discharge potentially to the wastewater treatment plant. So that's what we were initially feeling that we were dealing with, and that was based on an understanding that there was a hexavalent chromium concentration of about 15% in that tank, and assuming that the tank was full. So on that first slide, you see there where we've got the star at the top where it's at 8,000 pounds. Subsequent to that, Tri-Bar and Eagle revised that estimate because of additional information that became to light, and the new estimate of the amount of released hexavalent chromium dropped to 4,200 pounds. And that was because they learned there was a 5% concentration in that liquid because of what they were able to determine from evaluating it after they determined what had occurred. That represents a decrease of about 47.5%. It's about 52.5% of the initial report. So it's dropped from 8,000 pounds to 4,200 pounds as a potential exposure for the wastewater treatment plant. Now, subsequent to that time period, we've learned still more, right? So of that 4,200 pounds of hexavalent chromium, we've learned that there was an internal treatment system that was put in place because of the PFAS situation that was in play in the past from 2018, that's known as granular activated carbon, GAC units, right? So there's a passive process that was still in place regardless of the initial treatment process being missed. So that number of that amount of hexavalent chromium that might have been 4,200 pounds did go through that GAC unit, and the understanding right now, based on everything that we've learned through Eagle and elsewhere, is that the vast majority of the hexavalent chromium that was coming out of that discharge was trapped in that GAC unit, right? So we don't have real numbers, but the vast majority seemingly was trapped in that GAC unit, and they are doing testing on that GAC unit right now to determine what the concentration was there. I have been warned by Eagle that the testing of that granular activated carbon material is far different than a typical watery solution like we were dealing with before then, and the results could come as early as one day, which would have been right about the end of the business day today, but there was a very high likelihood that it will take longer than that because of what you're dealing with in that granular activated carbon process. So as of right now, to my knowledge, we don't have that result, but the understanding is that the vast majority of the hexavalent chromium was trapped in that GAC unit. Then from there, after that 4,200 pounds was reduced substantially through that GAC unit, it came to the wastewater treatment plant. And as Rich mentioned, our processes did a great job of trapping still more hexavalent chromium within the wastewater treatment plant in holding tanks and that ditch that we used. The normal processes basically function to take that hexavalent chromium, the exposure to sewage that takes that hexavalent chromium and reduces it down to that trivalent chromium, which Mr. Grant also mentioned, right? So once that discharge that came from the Wixom wastewater treatment plant after that was reduced first at the GAC unit at Tri-Bar, and then the vast majority that was remaining, which was a small amount compared to what it started out at, was also reduced in the wastewater treatment plant. We don't have a number yet on the wastewater treatment plant either. We do have samplings in that will help us determine what the level was that was retained in the wastewater treatment plant. We don't have those results back as of yet. But the number that we do have a pretty good understanding of is there's influent that comes into the plant. So when the discharge came from Tri-Bar, that was influent that came into the plant. Once it's gone through our treatment processes, the effluent, the thing that the substance, the water that is discharged to the Huron River watershed, that effluent has been tested, and we have solid information that the amount of chromium, hexavalent chromium, not even hexavalent chromium, at that point it was chromium, right? We mentioned it was reduced from hexavalent to trivalent chromium. So the total chromium, which is not equivalent to all hexavalent chromium, was reduced, and we think it's in the ballpark of 20 pounds. So we started off with an estimate of 8,000 pounds. It was reduced to 4,200 pounds. And then after all was said and done, we have testing results that indicate the amount that was discharged to the Huron River watershed was 20 pounds. If you do the math on that, that's less than 1%. In fact, it's 1/4 of 1% of what we thought it might be when it was at 8,000 pounds. So the exposure to the watershed is very small, and that's over 99% of that total chromium was contained either within the plant or at the GAC unit at Tri-Bar. So that's good news for what we think we're dealing with here. The other thing that I'll make mention of, if we go back to the one slide there, we talked about 144 tests being done throughout the watershed. So we've got 144 tests that were done throughout the watershed on various water samples, some of it at the wastewater treatment plant, some of it in Norton Creek, some of it in the Huron River, some of it in various ponds and water bodies throughout the Huron River watershed. Of those 144 tests that were taken, all but 3 registered non-detect levels of chromium, meaning the amount of chromium was so low that it wasn't detectable by the testing standards that are available today. The 3 that were not non-detectable were well within water quality standards. So there's different standards that are set. There's aquatic life exposure, there's drinking water limits. The drinking water quality limit, all of those 3 results, only 3 results out of 144 test results, came back as something more than non-detect, and they were all within water quality standards. So we don't feel at this point in time that there's going to be any information that's going to be coming forward that's going to indicate that that's going to change. We are doing additional testing, but we feel like we have solid information that the exposure that we thought we were dealing with, we are not dealing with. It's far less than that, and that it's within water quality limits. So that's the current standard or status of the situation. We will continue to get additional test results coming in from various sources over the coming days and weeks, just to make sure what's going on. The next set of test results that I think are the next set of test sampling that's going to be done is going to be focused on lower down the Huron River watershed, I should say, that will test more downstream to make sure that there won't be an impact on drinking water further down the line. But we'll be looking for those results coming in. We were hoping to have some additional results today. I mentioned about the wastewater treatment plant, as well as that GAC unit or granular activated carbon unit at Tri-Bar. We do not yet have those. We expect to have those within a day or 2. So that's basically the extent of our presentation we wanted to provide to everybody today, to hopefully provide some information and reassurance that the situation is not what we thought it was going to be potentially at the beginning of the event. So that's all that we have. I mentioned that we'd have time for questions. If Teresa Seidel wants to weigh in, she can do that. If anybody has any questions that are relevant for her, for anybody else here, we've got other people to answer questions. And that's the extent of the presentation that I want to make, Your Honor.
Deputy Mayor Risnick.
A couple technical questions for Mr. Grant. Mr. Grant, with the GAC filter itself having contained quite a bit of the hexavalent chromium before it actually went into the influent to the wastewater treatment plant. Do those have to be replaced, rebuilt?
The granular activated carbon is regularly replaced.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then the next question is the biosolids then that the chromium adhered to in the treatment plant, then that probably has to go through a special disposal process?
Yeah, we've got samples of that into the lab now to evaluate, is the chrome going to stay contained on the biosolids and can go to its normal landfill disposal, or does it have to go to a special landfill?
Okay, so there are special
There
landfills
are,
for these
yeah.
situations. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Smiley?
Thank you, Mayor Beagle. Just to follow up with Deputy Mayor Resnick. So there's some solids that need to be dealt with. Can you give me like a best case, worst case for how long our facility might be having to deal with getting back to normal and clean?
As soon as we receive, at the end of this week, we'll receive the what's called a TCLP chrome sample, which determines how permanently the chrome is adhered to the biosolids. And if, as we find in other plants and other situations historically, if this is similar, then we should be able to work carefully, but with normal procedures, and without any interruption to treatment or other services of the city.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilmember Gatchel?
Thank you. I guess a few general questions, not process questions necessarily. What failure within Tri-Bar's operations allowed this to happen?
I'll answer that. I mentioned that we were trying to do the police department investigation. I mentioned that we did not get the opportunity to interview anybody because there was going to be an attorney present that was going to be there the next day. By the time the next day came around, we had already discussed with state investigators turning the investigation over to them. We don't have any information about what the status of that investigation is at the state level or any other level at this point, and we do not have direct involvement in it, so I can't answer that question right now.
Are we expecting an update on the investigation at some point in the near future?
Yeah, I would expect that we would be updated as to the results as things come together and come to light.
Okay, so Tri-Bar didn't share any information at any point saying this is how this may have happened, or here's what we think?
The only thing I have is, rumors and guesses as to what might have happened. I don't have any direct information from anybody as to what caused it.
All right. Is Tri-Bar still operating with these chemicals and processes and other plants in Wixom?
To my knowledge, yes. The only plant that's not operating is Plant 5, the one that was the source of the issue. As to whether all of them or some of them utilize the same materials, I would have to defer to somebody. Yeah, it's one more is what I'm being told from the DPW director. So yes, there's another operation that still is utilizing the materials such as was present in Plant 5.
Has anyone investigated the other plant since the cease and desist order was put into place?
No, there's been no, there's an IPP or industrial pretreatment process in place for all of those facilities, and we don't know what caused the breakdown of it at Plant 5, but those other IPP program provisions should be in place at those plants, and there's been no change in operation at the plants.
Okay.
Or investigation of them.
Yeah, it just strikes me as a little odd. Clearly, they can have a process in place and not follow it, so you would think that someone, whether it's us or Eagle, would attempt to have a look at the other plants. So, thank you.
Again, we don't know what happened at Plant 5, so it's hard to say that they can't follow or weren't following or didn't follow at this point until we get more information.
Councilmember Berman?
I just have one follow-up question to your presentation, where you mentioned that that hexavalent chromium is not as popular nowadays being used, and most manufacturers have moved away from it. Is that basically what you said?
I don't recall saying that, although that's true.
You said that the trichromium was more popular now.
And I don't recall saying that, and yet hard chrome plating is demanded by some manufacturers, some assembly plants, and so some people still accomplish hard chrome plating with hexavalent chrome, and it's complicated to accomplish that. And so Tri-Bar is one of those that can do it, albeit not perfectly.
If I can drag a little bit more detail on it, Rich, you and I talked before the meeting about the fact that part of the reason that it's not as prevalent anymore is the manufacturing not being done in the United States.
Indeed, it used to be, again, when I started working with electroplaters in '86, they were making mistakes all the time. And these sort of biosolids contaminations were happening on a weekly basis. And this is the first time I recall this happening in Wixom. And these guys have been working here for some time. So there's two things going on. One, less manufacturing. Two, more people doing trivalent chrome plating. And frankly, even the human health and safety there at a plating plant that's using hexavalent chrome, that human health and safety protection is substantial. And the foam that they have to put over top of that, you now know is PFAS. And that's part of the containment of the hexavalent chrome. So these two are related.
So could a manufacturer still accomplish what they're doing without using this chrome and the PFAS?
That manufacturer would have to talk to their customers and convince them to use a different quality of part. And the hardness of the electroplated material is key to some wear and tear issues. Yet there are more expensive things out there that their customers could perhaps change to.
Okay. I was just curious if that they were locked in there or there were alternatives. But it sounds like there are other alternatives that could possibly be safer.
It's what the customer's asking for is what the initial answer is.
Yeah. If the customer is asking for hard chrome, somebody's going to provide it, typically.
Understood. Thank you.
If we have to haul away those solids, what's the expense on that?
Well, they were being dewatered with a press. We call that material filter cake. Much different than this dandy cake we had just now. Much different. And it was being hauled to landfill already. And so that would, we hope that that will continue with the same landfill and the same cost. That will again depend on the TCLP chrome results at the end of this week that we've asked for. To answer your question, if it doesn't go that way, if it does become hazardous waste because the chrome is so great in contact and it leaches off of the biosolids, then there's a different landfill and the cost is perhaps fourfold or fivefold more.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions, we will. That'll be the end of the presentation of the Tri-Bar untreated discharge to the Wixom Wastewater Treatment Plant. We'll move on to approval of minutes. We've got one set of minutes to approve tonight. That's from the regular City Council meeting of July 26, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Any questions, additions, deletions? All right, seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the regular City Council meeting minutes of July 26, 2022. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no correspondence tonight, so that moves us to the first call to the public. I'll read the rules to the call to the public. They are as follows. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included on the agenda immediately after correspondence and again immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of the council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reason for addressing the council, and all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. Do we have anybody for the first call to the public? Step up.
Diane Kurliski at 23...
Step up to the...
Diane Kurliski, 2301 Charms Road. I live in Milford Township, but I am on Norton Creek, about 1/8 of a mile away from the discharge from the wastewater treatment plant in Wixom. So probably one of the first. First question is, the wastewater treatment plant knew about it. They were taking steps to minimize it, yet the effluent still got released to Norton Creek. Why? And second question is, what was the parts per million at Hubble Pond, the 3 samples that made it all the way to Milford's Hubble Pond? What was the parts per million that you said was acceptable? I'd like to know that.
So on the first question, why released, the city, as I mentioned towards the beginning of the presentation there, it's an indeterminate time as to when it first started, but over the weekend is the only information that we have or had. Tim, I don't think we have an update on that yet, so it's over the weekend. We weren't informed of it until Monday, towards the end of the day on Monday.
So it had already been released before
Correct,
you
it had already
started
been
treatment?
released, exactly. And then once we became aware of it, we took steps. You know, and Tim can go into more detail. Tim Sickman's our DPW director, or Rich Grant can go into more detail. The treatment process is not a 5-minute process. It goes through a long set of steps, as was shown in that graph. So at some point in time when we were made aware of it, we stopped the discharge, and we did trap some of it that was still in a process at the system level and kept it in those holding tanks to begin with. And then, you know, we exhausted that storage, and then we began discharging again when we no longer had storage available to us, but that was long after Tri-Bar had ceased the continuing discharge of that hexavalent chromium. So there was a period of time before we were notified, and then after that we took steps to contain it for a period of time, and then once we did receive additional discharge, that should have been
So
less
it's
than
not all trivalent chromium that was released, some hexavalent chromium was also released?
That's right.
That
So
was before you even knew about it? Okay.
The number that I came up with, or that I provided earlier, it was total chromium, which would include hexavalent chromium.
Right, okay.
Correct.
And do you know what the parts per million was in those 3 positive
I defer to
samples?
Tim on that. If he's, do you have that information at your fingertips, Tim?
I believe the highest was 11. parts
Yeah,
per
that's,
million.
I
Which
know
is
that.
right at the limit.
There was 6 and there was 11. I'm just looking to test or check.
Acceptable, okay.
What was it, Tim?
Yeah, the 11 parts per billion, that's less, still less than drinking water standards, I think.
And that's all
The
right.
drink-
There, right.
16 is it 16?
Do you know if anybody's testing soil also, or are they only taking water samples?
Blair can come up, that's fine.
Like in Norton Creek?
So,
That's gonna happen.
that is happening. Eagle has represented.
Talk to the mic, Tim.
Yeah, sorry. Tim Sickman, City Wixom, DPW Director. We've been informed that Eagle, their surface water division, has been sampling sediments within Norton Creek, and we would expect results coming soon. They have not completed those samples yet, but those that have been detected were below water quality standards that we are aware of.
Do we have to worry about our wells?
So we have had discussions on that, and at this time, we don't feel that there's any issues with wells themselves. When there's heavy concentrations in a very specific area that are able to leach into the soils and whatnot, that could at that point be an issue. That hasn't happened in this situation. It wasn't the quantities that we had seen for that. So those are things that the health department, our understanding, the health department is looking at, and the surface water quality is also looking at those, and all indications right now show that we've been, those are all within the standards.
Would you suggest they test the well 4 months, 6 months down the road for chromium? Because the Eagle can do the test.
So if they're not finding if they're finding water quality standards in the creeks and the Huron River watershed, there would be no way to get it all the way down through into your groundwater. And so, yeah, that's the first mode of travel, and it continues.
Because I was told to not even go on my back deck because it's inhalant also.
So that hexavalent is, but as
And it's not all trivalent. Some
it's-
hexavalent got released. So.
It was degraded to trivalent.
So it's okay to go in my yard and breathe the air?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I can add a little more detail.
Okay, please do.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, we should be perfectly clear on the hexavalent, trivalent part. The precautions that were given were good, because at that time, we didn't know how much, where the hexavalent chrome went. We've since learned that the samples in the environment are non-detect for hexavalent chrome. And so when we say total chrome, we measure that to include both, but we also sample and measure for hexavalent chrome. And sample after sample after sample after sample is non-detect for hexavalent chrome in the environment. So there was there was some fortunate events that happened, and there was a lot of extra effort that happened to make sure to keep the chrome in the plant and to make sure that that chrome was reduced. Yeah.
Oh,
Of course, she's a hockey player too.
I've done that.
We all have.
Anybody else for the call to the public?
Oh, somebody's speaking to us.
Sorry. Line. Go ahead.
Next.
I'll give you the pleasure.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Dan Aubrey. I'm at 3569 Barberry here in Wixom. A couple questions. Is the Norton Creek discharge area that happened from Tri-Bar also connected directly to the Norton Creek, being at Wixom and Charms?
Yeah.
But it would be considered upstream?
Wixom and Charms is upstream, yes.
Okay. Last question. Concerning the GAC, the activated carbon, is this product, everything that I've done the testing in my years of doing water filtration, the GAC is not viable to remove either of the chromium levels, at least in the drinking water aspect of it. So I'm not an engineer for it, but why do they use a product that is at least not good for water filtration, as far as activated carbon?
So the GAC unit was not there to filter for hexavalent chromium. It just served to do that in this circumstance. It's there for the PFAS.
Which is a different...
That's the substance that's used to keep the dust from the hexavalent chromium down for the employees in the work area at Tri-Bar. And that's what the prior issue was with contamination in the watershed, when we didn't know about PFAS until testing methodologies were improved to the point where we could determine the levels that were problematic. And that's what came about in 2018, and that's when that GAC unit was put in place to contain the PFAS. But it did serve us well in this particular circumstance on the hexavalent chromium as well, but that's not what it's designed for.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jimmy Maher, 2835 King Ranch Drive in Milford. I just wanted to, I don't have a lot of questions today. You guys did a great job presenting, and I definitely appreciate that. But I did want to introduce myself. I own a substantial amount of acreage on the west side of Norton Creek. I actually own half of the creek. The other half is owned by other residents that are here. And I do have a lot of concerns. So I just wanted to come here tonight and certainly share that with you. I do have a deep love for Wixom. I was a Wixom resident for 15 years. As several of you know, I was on the Planning Commission for 13 or 14 years. I was trying to figure it out on my way here, but so I definitely have a huge love for the community, but I have a lot of concerns here. It just seems like we're getting beat up over this Norton Creek, between the PFAS, between this new contaminant. I'm concerned about what this looks like, what the long-term effects are, what the short-term effects are. Unfortunately, I don't know what 20 pounds of this product looks like versus 8,000 pounds. So I'm not here to discuss that today. That's not my forte. But it just seems like we're getting beat up. Nobody knows what's going down in Norton Creek. There's been issues with the deer out there, the wildlife, the DNR have been involved. There's been multiple tests. Now I'm questioning my well water as well. With that, I just thought it would be important just to come here and introduce myself and just let you know that I'm concerned about the impacts of the future, and if there are contaminants out there, and if something's settled in, since my property is physically the first property of the discharge, I want to make sure that that is addressed, and that it's reviewed thoroughly, and if a cleanup's needed, that it's cleaned up appropriately. And I hope that whoever's polluted this, if it's Tri-Bar or some other companies in the area, that they take full responsibility of this and make it right so that our properties are safe, and that we don't have a diminishing cost of our properties, and we don't have to worry about environmental concerns and go from there. So that's all I have today, and I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to come up here and just introduce myself to the ones that don't know me. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Something I want to make mention of, Mayor, before, if anybody else wants to come up, that's fine, was that we're having daily meetings with a variety of disciplines and agencies throughout the area, the state, locals that are concerned about it, EGLE, the Department of Health and Human Services, the EPA. There's a daily call that's been set up to stay on top of the situation with information as it develops. So those kind of concerns that the gentleman just raised regarding those other issues is something that would likely get discussed on those calls.
Good evening. I'm Roy Thorsell, 3207 Potter Road. So I heard about this same time, I think, roughly everybody else did. So I made a few phone calls. I called Oakland County Health, and I called State Eagle, trying to figure out what the story was. And everybody's very responsive. I was pretty happy with how people were dealing with it. I found out that through Oakland County, I can get normal water testing done, which I was doing just for your typical drinking water stuff. But they focus mostly on taste and smell type of chemical effects. They don't do anything related to chromium. I called Eagle based out of Lansing, had a similar discussion. They could do drinking water samples, but again, their drinking water samples doesn't cover chromium. They do chromium testing for environmental situations, I guess, like this, but they don't do it in their in-house lab. So my first question was, is there a relationship that the city or the state or the county has with a private lab where everybody in Wixom can work through one lab to maybe kind of streamline or get some kind of bulk deal in terms of testing drinking water for chromium? I know you guys are doing it environmentally, but I'm on a well, so I'm obviously sensitive to that. So I'm getting my drinking water tested for chromium. I'm curious if you guys have any relationship set up with a private lab yet for that type of request.
Not as of yet. That's something that I'm anticipating over the coming days that I mentioned on that 9 o'clock call. We're going to try to find out if that gets discussed and whether plans are going to be done to handle those kind of testing requests. That has not been addressed yet because of the immediacy of what's going on so far. And the understanding that wells that are done properly, permitted, and so on and so forth are not going to have an issue because of how far below ground the source water is. But that's something I anticipate could get addressed in those meetings. If something changes, we will provide information on it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything new.
One other question regarding the retention ponds or the basins, the chromium bonds to solids, and then it's eventually maybe scraped up. But I don't know the condition or the style of those retention ponds. Is there a chance for, we've had tons of rain recently, which is maybe good or bad for the situation, but does that risk leaching out of those pools and getting down into just the groundwater in the surrounding area?
All of the tanks that are at the treatment plant are concrete tanks, and typically we line those with a coal tar epoxy. And there's the consistency and the chemistry of chrome wouldn't allow that to leach through into the concrete down into the groundwater.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dick Russell, and I'm a resident of Highland Township, but I'm here as chairman of the Chief Pontiac Programs Committee. We're a nonprofit 501c3 with 1958 have been doing a backpacking hiking program in relationship with Heather's Canoe Rental. It basically starts in Proud Lake continues in through Milford and into Kensington. We also have an operation that initially started in Highland. Last weekend, I had for the first time the 4 scouts. Typically, they use our trail. That's about 95-96% of our users, but we also have other nonprofit youth groups. American Heritage Girls, Trail to Life, have been users of our trail process. And when we heard that you couldn't go into Kent Lake, particularly underneath 96 and into the end at Kensington Road, it impacts our special lake canoe program that we have in Island Lake, and had a special event scheduled for the end of August. All of that's been put on hold. But we were fortunate last weekend to have our first test unit only go upstream. And it's about 2.1 miles shorter in canoeing and about 2.3 miles shorter than hiking. But it's the only thing that we can offer to our youth that are involved with our program. My question is, what criteria will be used to allow us to enter into Kensington or Kent Lake for programs that are safe enough in the water to do that? Over the years, we typically will have 500-600, some years 800 people using our program across the winter experience, a hiking experience, or a hike canoe 2-day experience for a special award, and many people come back. So I've got about 12 years of history here that tells me that I need to ask questions for those future users. Anybody give me an idea when and what will allow Kensington and Kent Lake to be opened up for use?
Well, the notice that was put in place by the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services at the state level, to suggest that you stay out of the water until further notice. Based on the results, I can't speak for them because I'm not the author of it, and I'm not going to be the one who pulls it, but based on the results that we're seeing, it's got to be something that would be reviewed based on a comfort level as more results come in, that that's the true nature of the situation, and then potentially there could be a change after that. I don't know what the timing would be. That would be something I'd have to defer to the people that are going to issue that change. It would be the Department of Eagle and then the...
Well, we basically curtailed our program through the entire year. It's unfortunate. It normally ends in the water October 15th. But we've got groups that are saying, well, I'll just move to the next spring, and that's an unknown question.
Right.
So we'll keep vigilant in those aspects, but it could be a real shakeup for 64 years of history here. Thank you.
Anyone else for the first call to the public?
My name is Alan Hebner, Hebner Canoe. I wasn't going to speak tonight, I just came to listen. But what I haven't heard much of is the immediate impact that it's had on the public using the Huron River, both above and below Wixom Road. We've been trying to spread the story that above the Norton Drain, which is where we are, and up into Proud Lake is not being affected by this at all. The problem is that the public is not being informed of that. The whole Huron River has been, condemned basically. So my comment is that the sooner the better we get some clarification of this, because our business last weekend was down about 80% because people aren't even calling us to find out, hey, is it still possible to canoe? Dick Russell and the scouting program was one of the biggest programs for Hebner's, has been for all these years. So we've been in the business about 70 years now. Never seen anything like this before. So I know you guys don't really have the answers, but I would just like to be known that it's affecting not just the Hebner customers, but the paddling public that is really hurting bad now because they're afraid to get on the river.
Thank you. Anyone else for the first call to the public?
Steve Booley, 2537 Charles Road, just on the north side of Buno Road, so probably at ground zero for this. I'm aware that the PFAS spill of 18 and 20 and now hexavalent chrome, and it seems to me that if I were to try to sell my property, somebody would say, hey, you've had toxic waste spills, just keep flowing by you. And I've had no notice from the city or anybody. I do see some signs up at the parks. And I see that you can't water your grass, I can't have my dogs out there. And the back of my property is Norton Creek, it is the boundary. Much like Jimmy Maher, who's on the west side, a little bit closer, I'm on the east side. But we went from 10,000 gallons at 15% to 5% to 4,000 pounds. Now we're just at 20 pounds. Are we now saying that, okay, it's just 20 pounds, it's okay to swim in the water? Are we ready to say that this is okay to swim in the water? Because I keep seeing news reports that I shouldn't touch the grass until further notice. Not till like next week, not for like till tomorrow. And now I can't let my dogs out. I don't know what's going on with the deer population, turkeys and the minks and the groundhogs and the squirrels that all play in my yard that my wife loves. But it's just going on downstream, and I go out to the river and look, and I'm like, okay, now I can't even go out and get my feet wet if it was, because it's a floodplain down through there, because we don't know. I believe the guy's been working for the sewer department since '85. He's an expert. But hexavalent chrome or PFAS or the next thing that comes up that just flushes down the river, that we think that we trapped in some granular stuff and diluted it and then worked it down at 20 pounds. Does it sink? Does it float downstream? I have seen a note that it's in Kent Lake now. It's they tracked PFAS from Ann Arbor right back to Norton Creek, where it made a right turn and went right past my house, right up to Wixom treatment plant. So what's going on? Somebody at Tri-Bar fell asleep or whatever, I don't care. Maybe he was drunk. But where are the safeguards? And we're just putting it in a ditch until it overflows. Right past everybody's house. And that's my house. Right? That's in my neighbors and my community. And I've grown up in Wall Lake. I was with Wall Lake schools, been around Wixom, Milford, this area for my whole life. But it's just like, okay, we've got a nice PowerPoint presentation that shows how we're filtering it out, but I don't believe that for nothing. I think this is just throwing darts at it, going, okay, everybody feel good about it, but ain't nobody saying that I can go swim in the river right now. And poor Alan Hedger, which I know personally, he can't get his, he's losing his business. Canoes can't go down. But I still see people going in that river on Wixom Road and jumping in it and playing around in it just because, for lack of information. And I went down to Powers Beach. There's a placard that is it's printed on green paper on a pole at the end and one on the outhouse. And that says, hey, don't touch the water, don't feed the water, don't have your pets in the water. And it's just a shame, because if somebody isn't watching the news, okay, they're going in the water and there's hexavalent chrome or PFAS or whatever other chemicals that's in there. So is 20 pounds of hexavalent chrome an acceptable level? And does it float? Does it sink? Does it stay there forever? For life? What does it do? And I'm not asking you guys to be scientists, and I'm certainly not one. Just a normal guy. But, is it going to be there for 40 years like nuclear waste? Or is it, okay, it's all good, and it's, we got the next news story where they went and raided Trump's house and nobody's paying attention to the hexavalent chrome that's in Norton Creek now. Right? So does anybody got an answer?
Regrettably, no. The only thing I'm going to say is just kind of reiterate what we talked about, right? That notice stays in place for now, so you're right. You're expected to stay out of the water for now. You're not expected to. You're being advised to. So we'd advise you to avoid contact with water for yourself and your pets.
Well, I'm not expected or advised. I'm not going in it because You already said that you don't go in the goddamn water. Don't even water my grass with it. Right? So let alone all the wildlife that's up and down Norton Creek, you know, expect it or not, I'm not.
Yeah, that's the current status right now.
Right, and it's right now, it's never ending, correct?
It's in place, it says, until further notice.
Right, which is until, who knows? So.
With the results, we'll see. That's all we can say right now.
And it would appear to me that Tri-Bar is an habitual offender of this, whether it's PFAS or it's hexavalent chrome or plutonium next year, and we're doing nothing about it except putting it in a ditch, and if we got a couple of available tanks, we just store it in that. And then after that, just send it down the river. I apologize for being a little emotional, but you know, it's y'all's families too, and all these people here's families that are being affected by this, and their property values, and you know, and it's a dang shame. You know, we're trying to go greener, and here we got this problem going on. You know, I seen the marine environmental truck pulling into Tri-Bar's facility this morning, taking a right turn in there to go clean something up as I was going to work, and so I'm just a little upset about it. And you know, and when does it end? You know, when do we stop this? Thank you.
Anyone else for the first call to the public? Seeing none, I'll close the first call to the public, and we'll move on to city managers' reports. We have two city managers' reports tonight. The first one.
I just got one, real short, too late. Very short. Patel, Melissa, 2015, Winding Way Drive. I'll keep it short. Tri-Beer, I found out, I didn't know we had 5 locations here in Wixom. I looked them up, like 3 on back, 1 across from Menards on Alpha Drive, and then the other one was this plant, I think it was Plant 5. But anyway, the only thing I want to say is, the PFAS, they already did. We couldn't get the fish out in Kensington. We couldn't do anything. That was already a concern in 2018, excuse me. Then we had the air BS, where they put that metal, I don't know the term there, that was in fall of last year, and now this. So we got 1, 2, 3 strikes, everybody knows us, people hear about Wixom and they go, oh, you're the pollutants, and then you gotta go, well, and it's getting like that. And I wanna know, do they pay taxes? Because we had a tax abasement when we had the movie King thing come in, and everybody comes in, the big companies with no tax. Are they gonna be fined? And I'm not against industry, I'm not against manufacturing here, we're known from that. We brought them all in because of the Ford plant and all that before. But are they gonna pay taxes? Are they gonna pay fines? And what's gonna happen with that? That's what people are asking me, and that's how I feel. So, is there anything to that?
Yes, they pay taxes, and as far as them being fined, we have no idea at this time how the state's gonna proceed with that.
Thank you.
I can just answer one question related to the tax abatements. Of the city's existing tax abatements, no, Tri-Bar is not a recipient of any industrial facility tax abatements.
All right, last call, for the first call to the public. Seeing none, we'll close it. Again, no correspondence tonight. We'll move on to city managers' reports. The first one is the fire monthly report of June 2022. Any questions? All right, the next one is the police monthly report of June 2022. Any questions? All right, you guys are getting off easy tonight. Yeah. Next up is the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the items will be removed from the consent agenda and added to the regular agenda at the end of unfinished new business. Do I have a motion?
Support.
All right, I got a motion and a support to approve the consent agenda as presented tonight. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We have no unfinished business tonight, which moves us to the first item of new business is a recommendation to award a 3-year agreement to Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick Incorporated of Shelby Township, Michigan to provide geographic information system management services for the city of Wixom and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Assistant City Manager Benson?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of City Council, we bring this item to you tonight as one of numerous contractual services that the city uses on a regular basis. This was one that historically we have worked with Michigan State University to provide GIS or Geographic Information System Management Services for the city. Their contract was coming to an end, and this is a service that was put out to bid. Just to give a sort of quick overview of how the city uses our GIS system, essentially we manage our own internal database and bring in data from other sources, including Oakland County, our own BSNA systems. And there are numerous other avenues, including SEMCOG and even national sources for data that we could include into our internal system. We use this primarily for within our Public Works Department and our Construction and Development Services Department for everything from looking at properties from an economic development standpoint, tracking vacant properties, on the Public Works side, which is I'd say a little bit more commonly understood, tracking our roads, sidewalks, right-of-ways, those kinds of things. So given that this was a fresh opportunity to really evaluate service providers, we put this out to bid and received 5 different proposals. Of the 5, 4 of which were local and met all of the minimum criteria to be considered for further consideration, and so all were interviewed. After a pretty robust process, including talking about where our system is today from both a hardware and a software standpoint, given that we do host it ourselves, we're a little bit more unique than other communities who either run theirs through Oakland County or don't use it at all, or maybe they run it through their engineering consultant. That's often a common way that's done as well. With all of these factors in mind, and looking at the hourly rates for each firm, looking at the cost proposals that they provided to us, while not apples to apples for a sort of use as you need service, this is different than, let's say, putting up a bid of road where there's a fixed service for a fixed period of time, a fixed outcome. This is really more of a relationship that's being established. With that in mind, that is where the 3-year term recommendation comes from. We'd like to establish a multi-year process where we can make the upgrades to our system, really sort of implement some of these new processes, and then evaluate at the end of that term whether to continue or to what those next steps may be. With all of that being said, Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick Incorporated, or AEW, was a firm that simply stood out. All of our proposers, I thought, did a quality job, but on the basis of the quality, the examples of their work, the references from other service communities, and the way that they were able to understand the desired scope of work in our circumstances, ultimately led to our recommendation. As I mentioned, this is a sort of process where we set a budget as a city of what we would like to expend for this service. And they essentially work within that scope of work and within that budget. That would both be for the sort of ongoing regular updates to our system, incorporating data, setting up processes to, on an automated basis, incorporate data, as well as individual, there are new layers that we'd like to see, or, as an example, interactive Pazer maps, things that we can put out to the public. There are a whole gamut of things that you can do with geographic information systems, and the city has really scratched the surface at this point. So within the agenda item before you, we did outline what the sort of anticipated first-year budget working with AEW would be, You will notice that this is a decrease from the budgeted amount for the total year, which had stood at $49,500. That amount was based on our previous contract, which was basically an annual amount. So the system is a little bit different, something that we think is a benefit to the city and will allow us to better control the product we get and the costs that we pay to receive those. So with all that in mind, we recommend City Council's approval of this contract, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Benson. The questions I have, I noticed that in the proposal they included a GIS mobile application to allow us to, I know we talked about the sidewalk replacement program that, DPW Director Sigma or someone could actually go and put the geolocation of that cracked 5x5 panel on the sidewalk and put it into the GIS system. Is that going to be expandable to other uses as well? We were talking about private wells and septic and things like that. Those could be very valuable data points too, right?
Yes, it absolutely could be. Now, whether we would make that sort of publicly available for, let's say, individual private citizens to record that data and send to us, perhaps not, but it's all possible. Yes, we already do utilize the handheld system for data collection. I think Tim would agree with this. We could do so more robustly, and we hope that through the plan that we'll be able to work through with AEW, that we'll be in a better position to utilize that kind of technology and expand the data that we collect.
And then they will house it? The hardware will be on site?
Yes, the hardware will continue to be on site.
Continue here?
Yes, yes. We maintain most of our data except for the part that comes from Oakland County, which really is kind of our data anyways, but there's a specific arrangement there. Yes, we would continue to do all of that in-house, and that was one of the things about AEW, is that they also were able to demonstrate sort of technological capacity for helping us understand and maintain and upgrade how we house our system internally.
Right. So they'll assist us if we need to resize the hardware. Okay. All right, very good. Thank you.
Oh, and I should mention, we do have two representatives from AEW here in case you have any specific questions for them, Mr. Jeff Miller and Stephen Pangori.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to award a 3-year agreement to Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick Incorporated of Shelby Township, Michigan, to provide geographic information systems management services for the city of Wixom, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Welcome.
Thank you.
New business number 2 is a recommendation to award a change order for the 2022 road maintenance program for the courts of Highgate to F Allied Construction of Clarkston, Michigan, in the amount of $677,772.32. Award construction engineering to Hubble, Roth & Clark of Bloomfield Township, Michigan, for a cost not to exceed $62,000, and approve the associated budget amendment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
A motion and support. Director Sigma?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. So initially, if you recall, this year we had planned to complete the Maple Run subdivision, and we put out bids early spring for completing that road project. And the secondary one, which we are recommending now, was planned for 2023. And what we'd like to do is, we asked the contractor that bid for Maple Run 2, that won the bid for that, if we would extend the bid tabs and the associated requirements for what would be needed over in Courts of Highgate, and they agreed to the prices that you see in front of you. Those are the bid documents, that the costs per tab, if you will, per line item, that they were given this spring. And we feel that is is representative of what is needed right now, and we would like to proceed with this. Now, when we put the initial budget together, those were previous year's information, so costs have gone up over the last year, and we weren't quite ready to identify all of the items that were required for Courts of Highgate. So once we went through all of those, set up a quantities list that was estimated, then Allied Construction reviewed that and the costs that they had previously given us, and that's where the $677,000 came from. We think that it is the right time to do that now. If we would have to wait till spring, it would be added costs that we feel would. We need to do it at some point, and this was the next subdivision in line for upgrades. So we would like to proceed at this time.
Councilmember Grella Fox.
So I understand why you would ask the contractor that we're using now, thinking that, well, hopefully we'll get a good price because they're already working, doing a project for us. But $227,000, that's a pretty big increase over, I understand it was a few years ago, so I get that, but you don't think it would be worth it to go out and bid that piece?
It is based on quantities, so we've got a base price, so let's say, I don't know, some kind of a grocery item that you pay per piece. We thought at one point that there was 6 dozen of them. Now there's 8 dozen per se, and their price was based on dozens. So and that's how they itemize it. So our quantities changed to some extent. Once we say, okay, we are going to do this, let's go back through and look at it, and it does change things.
If you don't think that we could get a better price going with someone else?
I think one, we rebid, we opened that opportunity up. Gas prices have gone up considerably since March. That alone would be a thing. Mobilization charges, they are already in town, and we anticipate that they're going to be resurfacing the Maple Run subdivision within the next few weeks. So we want to keep them rolling, if you will, and that's one of the other things. So it is completely up to you. That's if we did divide that up into 3 different sections. So if it's a cost factor based on numbers, we can take some and do some later. We're trying to keep Courts of Highgate all in one subdivision, if you will, so that moving forward 20 plus years from now, and our folks are looking at this maybe again, at that point they can do that all at once again. So we're trying to do it in stages.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councilmember Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Living in Maple Run, I'm living through this project. I can say that I've had nothing but good interactions with all of the contractors with Allied, and the staff from HRC has been phenomenal at keeping the residents informed, going door to door. And looking at it from a cost perspective, if my memory serves me right, Maple Run was right around $400,000, so approximately $10,000 per house for the street. And Courts of Highgate is 60 some houses, so we're really right in the same ballpark per house. Obviously my subdivision isn't done yet, so I can't say it's going to be a great job, but I'm hoping so. And I think that if the pricing was good for that, obviously if we were to send it out to bid and come back higher now, I'm in favor of moving forward with this now.
Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Sigma, first of all, I had an opportunity to drive on those courts just last night to check them out, and I support the fact that they need to be redone.
Thank you.
They're not the worst roads in Wixom, but it's time. And then my second question, actually my only question was, in line with what Councilmember Behrman just asked, how does this relate to the Maple Run quote that they were successful in winning? It sounds similar. Is that your assessment as well, that it came in about where you expected it to be based on what we're paying for Maple Run?
Yes. And again, their quantities were more on that one, so the price would be more. But the actual cost per bid tab item is the same for the most part. So yes, it's comparing apples to apples. It's just, there's just a little bit more work there that needs to be done.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to award a change order for the 2022 road maintenance program for the course of Highgate to FLA Construction of Clarkston, Michigan, in the amount of $677,772.32. Award construction engineering to Hubble Roth and Clark of Bloomfield Township, Michigan, for a cost not to exceed $62,000, and approve the associated budget amendment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. New business number 3 is a recommendation to authorize the retention of Plant Moran PLLC of Detroit, Michigan as the city's auditor for a 1-year period covering the audit of fiscal year 2021-2022 at a cost not to exceed $65,897. Do I have a motion? So moved.
Support.
Ms. Stamper?
Before you this evening on this report is a request to retain Plant Moran as the city auditors for fiscal year 21-22. This year's total cost would be $65,897, which reflects an increase of $4,597 over last year. The city's portion that we actually pay will be approximately $53,035. The remainder of $12,862 is paid directly by our water and sewer contractor, F&V. The budget does contain sufficient funding for the expense out of the various accounts that pay for the audit annually. And this year's audit is proposed to be done still on a hybrid basis, but more of the work being done on site, as they have found that that is more beneficial to them and us to handle the audit on site. I respectfully request that Plant Moran Services be retained for the fiscal year 21-22 audit.
Any questions? Seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to authorize the retention of Plant Moran PLLC of Detroit, Michigan as the city's auditor for a 1-year period covering an audit of fiscal year 2021-2022 at a cost not to exceed $65,897. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business number 4 is a discussion for smart transportation item that will be in front of the Oakland County Commissioners this week. All right, Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. This was brought about by primarily an email from our state senator, Jim Runstad, sharing some details about a vote that the county commission is expected to take in the upcoming week or few weeks here. Essentially trying to bypass a transportation agreement that has been voted down repeatedly by residents in multiple counties by forming an Oakland County Transportation Authority and not allowing any communities to opt out, which our city currently opts out of other agreements because our residents don't really use the program, and we wouldn't expect under an Oakland County program that ridership or users would go up dramatically. Aside from that, some of the relevant data points would be that there are just over 1 million people living in the county, and it costs about $115 per person to operate, and it runs, the current system runs at a massive deficit. It costs to the tune of just shy of $150 million to operate SMART, and it collects in fares $4 million. So $4 million collected for $150 million spent. Obviously, most of us wouldn't be spending that kind of money if it were our own pocketbooks. I don't think that the county government should get in the habit of trying to pass something that largely isn't going to be beneficial to the majority of residents. The current system isn't useful to most residents as it is. It's not going to change if you start to force cities and taxpayers to pay for things. Millage rate maximum would be 0.95 mils for the next 10 years. Again, no opting out. And so that is a burden on taxpayers at a time where inflation is high and you're asking them to pay for things that they're not going to use. Largely, in my mind, county government is kind of a useless level of government aside from being there to provide economies of scale for roads and infrastructure and things like that, not to steal money from residents to pay for pet projects for elected officials. So I'd invite anybody else to kind of chime in, and then I guess if we can make a motion on a resolution and vote as council calling on all the county commissioners to oppose forced taxation for useless programs, that'd be great.
Councilmember Smiley?
Thank you, Mayor Bingham. Yeah, I'll add a few items, to support what Councilman Godgel is saying. The smart millage is expiring, and the Board of Commissions is proposing something to take its place. With the opt-out not being a part of the proposal, that's the big problem. They've rushed it. The Board of Commissions. I was just last Thursday. I was actually at the meeting that they first proposed put forth the language, and our current county commissioner Phil Whitebird, he saw it for the first time that day. Since then, they've had a couple of meetings on it. I went to VADA and to finance. Goes to another meeting tomorrow, and then they vote on it tomorrow at 4:30. So again, rushed, and a few more problems I had with it. There's really no plan attached to it. It's all very vague. It's either that or it's a lack of transparency because there's no details into what exactly the communities are getting, with this new transit system. And it's important to make a distinction here. They're voting tomorrow to put it on the ballot, not voting to make it happen, voting to put it on the ballot. A couple more things. Trying to find things that Councilman Gouch didn't already cover. At that meeting last Thursday, there were a couple of different communities. Supervisor Larry Gray from Commerce was there in opposition to it, as well as Milford Supervisor Don Green. And he had Supervisor Green had a interesting attachment to what they do. The 0.95 mils would mean $1 million, for Milford. And I'll get to what ours is in a second here. They take care of their own system for $100,000. Now I didn't see his numbers. I'm not sure exactly what they get for $100,000, but they're taking care of their transit, their busing needs, for far less money. And he wanted to know where's the other $900,000, going to go. And I'd have the same question for us. Steve and I assume Marilyn, figured out that 0.95 mils for us would be $845,000. And just for the meeting, so we didn't get to talk about it. Our transit needs, because we're an opt-out community like Milford is, so we take care of our own needs. $30,000, you said, is what we...
2022-2023 budget is $30,000, yes, for People's Express service. That
takes care of what we need, and so what are they going to do with the other $815,000 that we got to pay them, if this were to go through, since there's no opt-out? So I'm, not too happy about the idea of doing this either, and I would support some sort of stern letter to them. Actually, I'll go a little further. I was I wasn't planning on going tomorrow to the commission's meeting, but I will go and say very much what I just said here to them. Not sure how much of an effect that has.
Councilmember Berman?
I guess the only thing that I would add is just put numbers on it. So basically, we're taking, what, a $300,000 house in Wixom, we'd be giving everybody a $150 tax increase if this was to pass, correct? Just to put that in perspective to everyone who's out there. So if your house is worth about $300,000, you'd have a $150 a year tax increase if this proposal by the county was to pass. And obviously, if we're taking care of that for a lot less within the city, I'm not sure why we as a municipality would support this.
Councilmember Gremlin Fox?
What are our options, if any? You mentioned a letter or something to go
Yeah, I mean,
for a resolution.
essentially, it's just a show of, as a municipality within the county, we're displeased that you're even entertaining this. I mean, they're going to vote however they want to vote, and then it goes up the ballot, and hopefully everyone votes again as they have in the past and says, no, thank you. But really, it's just a show of, you have elected representatives within the city telling you, we have zero interest in this.
And then they're basic, that's the only option we really have, correct?
Yeah, I'd just say some sort of a action by the council indicating your happiness or dissatisfaction with the proposal, your support or lack of support for the proposal, worded as you will. You could mention tax impacts, you could mention the service concerns for that tax impact, you could mention whatever you wanted to get the point across as to what your opinion was.
Would it be possible if we could get something taken care of and written up and get it to Councilmember Smiley, and when he goes to the meeting tomorrow night, or tomorrow afternoon, he could read it into the minutes on behalf of City of Wixom?
Yeah, you could either take an action or we could prepare a letter indicating discussion at the council meeting indicated a lack of support for it. I would probably lean towards a formal action, just making it easier at this point. And Assistant City Manager Drew Benson did attend a majority caucus meeting that was held yesterday when I asked him to do so. So he's got some information as to what was discussed there.
Yeah, I was just, I can speak to a certain degree, and I actually wish that I had some of the images that they showed in that meeting. They did not make that available for distribution to kind of take back and bring with me. I don't believe that was their intention. You know, I'd be happy to talk about in terms of what their proposed service area would be, but I don't think that's the point here. So just any questions you have about that meeting, I can try to answer. But to add to Steve's point, we can certainly, from the administrative perspective, help put together a letter. But given the time frame, even just an action from council, this is our statement, and then the direction to have Councilmember Smiley communicate such to the county may be just as effective as a written resolution at this point.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Yeah, I'm also opposed to it, and we should either have a resolution or a letter or something that you take. One of the questions I had, what is the expiring smart millage? Do we know how much it is?
I should. It's not much different than the current proposal. It's right in that neighborhood, I believe. I don't remember the number.
And the only thing we take advantage of is the smart credits for the senior transportation. Is that correct?
Right. There's community credits and municipal credits, one for opt-in communities and then one for opt-out communities. So if you're an opt-in, you get both. If you're an opt-out, you get only one. We take our credits that come from SMART and use it for that People's Express service and funding. That $30,000 expense largely through that funding source.
Yeah. So 30,000 versus 800.
Correct.
Easy math. Okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Gatchell?
Thank you. I'd like to make a formal resolution that I get me typed into the record because everything's recorded. So just be it resolved that the City Council of Wixom hereby calls on all Oakland County Commissioners to oppose the proposed transit plan that would force taxation upon residents without retaining a municipality's right to opt out from such a program. Need a second.
Support.
Support.
Discussion, Councilmember Sharp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really know what we're talking about. I don't really like surprises at the dais, and so I will not be supporting this. I don't even know if I support it or not. And then we're talking about numbers that are guesses and just verbals. Sorry, I just can't do business this way, so thank you.
Just in response to that, I wish that we had more time to make a more educated, more thorough review of it. The news broke at 1 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday that this was being considered by the county commission. Was the first I heard of it.
And I got an email from Senator Runstead last night at about 8 o'clock, and I forwarded a copy to everybody this morning on that, so I apologize if you didn't get it.
I got it. I just didn't know we were going to be talking about it tonight. It got added to the agenda at 7:05.
All right. Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Maybe just one final comment. It could still make the ballot, independent of what we said.
Yeah, we got 6 months to talk, or 4 months to talk about it.
I think the resolution from us is appropriate.
Anybody else? All right, I got a motion and a second to approve the resolution to send to the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Councilmember Brendan Fox?
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp?
Nay.
Councilmember Smiley?
Yes.
Mayor Beagle?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Yes?
Councilmember Behrman?
Yes.
Councilmember Gatchel?
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. New business number 5 is a discussion regarding known carcinogens and toxic chemicals. And I can even read my own handwriting here. And manufacturing and industrial settings. Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. So I wanted to have a discussion, not specifically about a particular recent incident, but more in a broader sense, because what's happened should, I think, not be glossed over, despite hopefully a lesser environmental impact than was initially anticipated and broadcast. I don't think it's good news any way we cut it that what happened is even remotely possible. I think it's extremely dangerous to our residents, to our environment, and to our neighbors. And up here we've talked about having good neighbors on other projects such as the airline trail, and sometimes we haven't had great neighbors, and I don't want to be that city at all. So I think we need to be looking out for the wider area as well. So I think, to me, this is an opportunity for hopefully all of us to discuss beyond what happened, maybe steps we can take to make sure it doesn't happen again from any business, such as maybe the city investigating whether there are any other companies that are using similar chemicals in their processes or other toxic chemicals, and investigating whether, and it relates to a question I asked earlier, I guess, if there's a permitting process at any function of government, city, county, environment, state, federal, like, does any company have to say, hey, we're still using this toxic chemical? And is there a permitting process for it, for that? Is there an inspection process? Is there regular inspections? Because if there isn't at any other level of government, to me, that's something that we should be investigating on our side at local government. There was talk about differences between manufacturing processes between hexavalent and trivalent chromium. Hexavalent chromium is banned in all of Europe, whereas here we still use it clearly. So investigating alternatives, basically. And so I wanted to open this up to discussion for everybody about how we can learn from it, and hopefully over the next few months make sure, aside from what has already happened and how we deal with that, how we make sure it doesn't happen with any other company within city limits in the future. So I wasn't sure if anybody had any thoughts or comments.
Hey, Jason Brittmeyer, does the fire department have a list of what chemicals are used in these companies, so when you go there for a fire or a situation, you know how to handle it?
Yes, as part of our annual inspection business license process, all companies have to, it's not a, some circumstances they list out all the chemicals, but yes, there's a general form that goes to every business listing out flammable, hazardous chemicals. So yes, we do have a general idea of who has what's being used.
Okay, so that end of it would be pretty easy to manage for us. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Tim Sigma should weigh in on that as well, Your Honor.
So the wastewater treatment plant and as a whole is regulated by EGLE, and EGLE is regulated by EPA. EPA came out with pretreatment standards back in the 70s and 80s that regulate this type of process and a lot of different ones. There's federal categorical standards for metal finishing that we are following. It's 40 CFR 413 is the statute that they use for metal finishing treatment and disposal. Now there are 800 plus industries in the city of Wixom. They are primarily not regulated because they don't discharge industrial wastewater to the treatment plant. Those treatment, the ones that do are inspected. So we get a list of companies as they come in, and our operators look at the types of disposal that they have. If it's considered significant, they issue industrial permits for that. We've had temporary industrial permits that would do a one-time discharge if someone would like to discharge 500 gallons of something. We have it tested at that point. And after that's tested and we figure out what's in it, then it's allowed to discharge, and it's discharged at a certain rate, at a certain concentration that we know of. And those are only involved in the ones that we know that the wastewater treatment plant can treat. This particular one, this incident, there was a slug control plan that's had issues. There was a complete process that they didn't follow, and if we're still investigating all of these and this specific incident. Tribar, it does have 5 industries. Only 2 of them discharge industrial waste to the system. The other ones have zero discharge of industrial waste that is needing to be regulated. So those portions of the company really aren't part of this process. They may have chemicals on site, but they are not discharged to the sanitary sewer. So those kind of regulations aren't necessary. So in short, we have local limits, we have state guidelines, we have federal guidelines that we're all trying to follow. And there are certain criteria for each of those that we're checking off the boxes. So if somebody asks us why we're not quite sure yet, it's because we have 40 different check boxes that we're trying to look at all at once. And that's what's going on.
So are you saying that even if we imposed a local level, the EGLE could necessarily?
So the federal guidelines, are established based on criteria specific for treatment plants and receiving streams. EGLE can impose more or stricter guidelines if required. Now they have to be substantially based so that the companies can investigate and be able to treat to a certain standard. And then the local limits can be even stricter than that. So to answer your question, yes, we may be able to make them more stringent. The issue is that they still have to be certified by by a certain process. We have to look at our receiving streams for that piece. We also have to hold public hearings for that. And then we also have to rationalize that in a specific way that makes it fair and equitable for everyone. Not only we would look at the environment, obviously, as safety and health, but then we would also look at their abilities to treat it and our abilities to treat it. So there's a lot of different things that are involved in that.
Councilmember Gatchell?
Thank you. I guess just follow-ups. So you answered the one question about can we be more strict than the EPA and state guidelines, which is useful to hear. I think in terms of public hearings and figuring out tonight obviously showed there's great concern. So to me there wouldn't be hopefully any issue if that came up down the road. But in terms of all the different kind of people that are involved in inspecting and regulating and whatnot, is anyone actually going into these plants to look at the systems and saying, hey, this pipe from the tank of toxic chemicals shouldn't be directly or indirectly connected to our wastewater system?
Yes. So that pretreatment program requires if it is a categorical industrial user, required on an annual basis, at least annually, to inspect that facility. So each of our categorical users are inspected annually at a minimum, and our wastewater treatment plant operators do that. Also, with their pre-treatment permit, they're required to do systematic sampling, and this particular one was doing weekly sampling for PFAS, and they were showing discharges for that. And then the wastewater treatment plant was also doing those types of sampling on a program that is unknown to the industrial user. So we can go in at different times unbeknownst to them and sample their treatment systems as well to keep that, to ensure that the integrity of their sampling program is adequate.
So is there not currently like a standard or guideline that says don't connect the pipe from that tank to the water treat? Like, how would this have happened unless it's currently allowed?
So it's allowed based on the design of the system, and we reviewed the entire design of the system, and if they follow the design, it will work and they'll be able to treat their processed waste. Some of it is still hauled off, and those particular ones are done off, treated off-site. But there are standards for that, and there's a process that is in place for that.
So maybe more direct and plain language answer to that. You asked if there is anything that precludes somebody just directly connecting a pipe from something discharging a toxic chemical directly to the wastewater treatment plant. Yes, industrial pretreatment programs exist, and as such, they're required to process that waste before it comes to the wastewater treatment plant. There was an IPP in place with Tri-Bar, and for some reason, a portion of the waste that should have been treated through that IPP process was not.
Yeah,
and that's to be determined as to why.
And we're still investigating.
Because in some indirect way, we'll say it's all tied into the wastewater treatment system to get from whatever tank all of that stuff was in to wastewater treatment, and if we rely on them following the process, which we can't rely on anymore. That has been kind of
a valid concern. Yes,
that trust has been broken multiple times, frankly. But so essentially, there's no standard in the systems aside from saying you can do it, but you have to follow these other processes, and we have to rely on you doing what you say you're going to do. There's no shut off or kind of lockout to say there's no chance of that stuff making it into here directly or indirectly. That's kind of what I guess my takeaway is. So realize that another process.
I guess kind of, so if that system gets shut down, is there some type of backflow that you can do? So if that system shuts down, the backflow shuts and it stops any water or pretreatment chemicals to go. Is there anything like that that can be put in?
The industrial side of that, there are a sequence of PLCs that it goes, that's monitoring that. There is a valve that goes through the system, and we did talk about that earlier tonight. So there are processes in place that should have prevented it.
And the investigation has to be complete to determine how it happened.
We're still looking at it. We're still looking at all that. So
I didn't know.
I can't.
I didn't know if that was on there or not, or if that was something that we could do, because I know they have them for houses, so the sewers don't back up and such like that. Deputy Mayor Resnick, and then.
I guess my only add to the conversation would be that, to me, with IPP plans in place, where appropriate, it's more of a process failure where perhaps F&V could assist in reviewing an individual industrial user, their process, and looking for a poke-yoke way to say, hey, this cannot happen, right? I think that would be more appropriate in doing some of those process reviews.
We continue to do that, and we're working with the state and EPA for that. Local limits as a whole, we review those every 5 years as required as part of our NPDES permit. That permit is up, and we'll be getting a new one in September. It's up right now. It's in public. It's under public notice, and we have more restrictions in that permit than we have in the past. So, I mean, those are all parts of the system as a whole that are watch guards for prevention. Yep.
And I know that, like on our fats, oil, and greases, if a new restaurant that deep fried chicken came into town, we would make sure that they had the basin installed.
Correct.
When they did the construction, or your permit would not be issued, so.
Yes. Yes.
We're learning.
But also in those instances, just like the industrial processes, you're still stuck with the situation where there's, they have to comply with the processes on their site.
Right.
And, when we've gone through situations where we've been made aware of fats, oil, and grease violations or exceedances, and we go in and reevaluate, test what they're doing and what the breakdown is, and that's, similar to this industrial process. There are processes in place to prevent it from happening, but it's not foolproof to keep it from happening, obviously, as we've experienced with this situation.
Councilmember Bergman, and then I'll go down to Councilmember Brown Fox.
I guess the only thing I was going to add is I assume that we're going to learn from this process and develop some new policies and protocols to hopefully prevent something like this from ever happening again. And that, I assume that's already in the works in your department and the wastewater plant. Correct?
That is correct.
I appreciate that and all the work that you guys do.
Member Colonel Fox.
Thank you for the information. Just two, I hope, short questions. You had said what's involved with the industries that have in Wixom that actually discharge into our system, and that we can go in at any time and review those systems or check them out. Do we have a method by which we go in every so often, a schedule?
Yeah, and we have an enforcement response plan that we follow for that. It was that particular plan was part of within our ordinance, and we have local limits that are involved in that. Those both, we're working in concert, if you will, with Eagle and making sure that those continue to be updated as needed. So yeah, there are plans and ordinances already in place for these kind of things, and we are allowed in a reasonable manner to inspect those industries when needed.
Any other questions, comments? Councilman Kutcher? Are you satisfied?
Yeah, I think it's just headed in a good direction. The news was obviously concerning to all of us, and unfortunately, there's no action we can take immediately, despite I think probably all of us wanting to. But it's something that we can't, despite whatever news comes out about test results, I think it's something that we need to pursue. It should be a bit of a wake-up call.
Very good. And with that, we'll move on. That completes new business tonight. We'll move on to the second call to the public. I'll read those rules again for the second call to the public. And those are: the public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included on the agenda immediately after correspondence and again immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of the council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reason for addressing the council, and all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. Do we have anybody for the second call to the public tonight?
Nancy Dingleday, 2220 West Una, Wixom. A note to say thank you to everyone for the wonderful comments that you made, and the flowers and the cake and all the goodies. Truly appreciated. And it brought back memories. So it's ironic that tonight, excuse me, it's ironic that on your agenda tonight was the smart bus issue or transit issue. Having been at the county and suffered through any number of conversations, I hope I understood your direction tonight. I was sitting there nodding my head saying, opt out, and I hope that's what the decision was. You have to balance the whole county and the transportation issue to the amount of money that is generated by your own community and measuring that to the service that you get. Not an easy road, but again, thank you so very, very much for thinking of me and the wonderful time I've had here tonight. Thank you.
Ron Moore, 1171 North Eddy, Walled Lake. And for the next week, I am your Director of Public Safety, and until recently, I was your Chief of Police. Please forgive me for extending an already long meeting. I promise to be brief, 2 minutes tops. This is my last council meeting as an employee of the great city of Wixom. When I was an intern and a cadet and a young police officer for the Wixom Police Department, I don't think I could have told you the mayor's name, much less named one member of council. I viewed the council as this almost mythological, ambiguous entity that kind of operated out on the fringe of the city somehow. I didn't know anything about a city council. As a middle manager, that is a police sergeant and a police lieutenant, I became more aware of the body known as mayor and council. In my uninformed and immature view of this body, I saw it as an entity that sometimes supported the police department, but was sometimes adversarial towards the police mission. Again, that was my uninformed and immature view. And then I became the Chief of Police and Director of Public Safety, and the young kid who started out as a police intern was now put in charge of public safety, the police department and the fire department, and now I was expected to enter into a working relationship with the 7 of you, not the 7 of you, but some of you, the mayor and council. And over the years, there have been many conversations that have taken place, and philosophies and ideologies have been batted back and forth. Relationships have been developed, I hope. I think they have. And eventually I realized two things. One, I realized that the 7 of you have, much like me, have the city's best interest at heart. And 2, I realized that I actually kind of like the 7 of you. So, Peter, Tom, Rob, Keenan, Tia, Peter, Pat, who I've known for years as Rick, I want to thank you for the friendship and for the partnership that we've been in for the last several years, trying to make this great city even greater. I won't say that I'll miss being in this room every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, but I will miss seeing you all on a regular basis. Please take care of yourself, and thank you for everything, and may God bless the great city of Wixom. Thank you.
Thank you.
He'll be back for budget session.
And don't forget, we're on YouTube, Ron.
Hi, Lori Rich, 50140 Helfer Boulevard in Wixom. Couple of points that I want to make. I wasn't planning on making a couple of these comments, but they are spurred from tonight's meeting. First, we all have to do a better job of speaking louder. I'm getting a little older perhaps, but I don't think it's my ears. I did have a very hard time hearing some of your comments, and Tim Sikma needs a little bit louder voice as well. I'm an opt-out girl. Thank you. Been on the dais previously when that decision was before us as well. Tri-bar discussion, thank you so much for the information. Thank you, DPW, City Administration, for all the efforts that you put into protecting us. Appreciate that. And I wanted to say one other thing on opt-out. We have to remember that many of our residents during the pandemic had their income very seriously impacted. Many lost their jobs, many had hours reduced, some sold cars to try to pay bills, some are in a financial deficit situation. It'll take years for those families to get whole again and to get solid footing. So anything that the city can do to help keep the rising costs down on them, like this opt-out millage, would be much appreciated. What I'm really here for tonight, though, and what I was prepared to speak about was Grand River. I live in Leisure Co-op. I'm a Phase 1 member. I'm not here in an official capacity. I will preface this by saying I have already had a similar discussion with the city manager, as well as a couple of times with Tim Sikma. They've been most helpful. What I'm here tonight is to address the 7 of you. You guys have the opportunity in many ways to network, especially with people in Oakland County, other political officials, and I want you to hear the pain that we are experiencing at Leisure Co-op. We're not necessarily convinced that that pain is going to get better when the Grand River project is completed. The volume of traffic is horrendous. It is much worse now because of other factors that will go away, such as the freeway project. That is not the driving problem, though. The driving problem is the continuous expansion of development to the west. Amazon distribution center, the volume of Amazon trucks, I mean, it's almost like ticking seconds on a clock. It's just not a road that's very well designed for that volume of traffic. And unfortunately, the city developed over time in such a way that its only senior development is kind of stuck outside of the residential planning for the city now, in almost a commercial area abutting this main road that we call Grand River. We can't do much about the volume of traffic, but we can take note that these, what I call a more vulnerable population,
the senior community, is trying to maneuver that road multiple times a day, sometimes not quite successfully, to be honest. And we need to have at the forefront of our minds always to how do we keep them safer. One of the problems that we are dramatically experiencing is the noise volume. And that is something that maybe can help to be mitigated down the road. Some of the vehicles, gravel trucks, I'm not a car girl, so I won't use the right language. I don't know, downshift, upshift, brake, I don't know, whatever it is. They rumble and grumble and make a heck of a lot of noise. I am the closest unit to Grand River. Circumstances beyond my control made me move to Leisure Co-op. I am quite happy there, and my neighbors have expressed concerns as well, serious concerns, much more stringent than mine, about the volume of the noise. It is unbearable. And so anytime you interact with Oakland County, if you can keep that thought in your mind, and if you have a segue type moment in a conversation where you can hit home the point that something needs to be done. And that's all we can hope for, is that maybe there'll be a positive result. Secondly, kind of contingent on that, is the 12-mile road project. And I've mentioned this, actually when Novi put in the sidewalk that goes down 12 Mile, that is on the south side of 12 Mile, kind of like on the Catholic Central edge. I actually talked to the city at that time, talked to Novi at that time. A lot of our seniors walk for fitness or for fun, ride bicycles. Out of that entire stretch of 12 Mile, we're the only development that can't access it. Yet we have a street that ends on 12 Mile, and we're facing an emergency access easement to Catholic Central property, but we have to crawl through bushes to get to the sidewalk. It seems to me like there might be a way for Novi to be a good partner with the city and facilitate some sort of safer means of accessing the sidewalk. And finally, my last point is bike paths. Funny story, a friend of mine, Robert, and I rode our bikes up to, we were brave enough finally, I should say I was brave enough finally to take my bicycle up Wixom Road. I ride my bike a lot, 20, 30 miles a week, sometimes 20 miles a day. There's no good place from Leisure Co-op except you're on the sidewalk. But I wanted to go to downtown, so we rode our bikes up to downtown. Unfortunately, there's gaps in the sidewalk. So he got 2 flat tires on the portion that was not a sidewalk. I didn't get flat tires because I chose to ride my bike on Wixom Road. So if I've been following some of the discussions about potential for the city to, I can't remember the correct terminology, but to have some sort of a cost-sharing program to fill in some of the gaps on the sidewalks. I don't know if there's any possibility of at least getting one side of Wixom Road done without gaps. It would help me a lot. I also, on another journey on our bikes, did the trail, the bike path for a long distance, and I found it very well done, and really appreciate the bike paths that are around here as well. I think that's about it. I appreciate your time. And one other thing: when will the audit results estimated to be back?
For last year's audit or this year's audit?
The one that you just.
That won't be until usually end of November, beginning of December.
Okay, I want to come back then. Yep. Thank you.
Derek Hewlett from 477 Fletcher. I wanted to address the council, through the council, and express my family's heartfelt gratitude towards someone here in the audience that is known as Public Safety Ron on Facebook. You know him as Ron Moore. There was a great write-up in the Spinal Column last week. He's leaving some big shoes for the incoming police chief, and I hope that the administration continues its presence on social media, because it's been very helpful for our family as well as many other residents to stay connected with what's going on. And furthermore, I'd like to congratulate Ron on becoming Mr. Mom. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else for the second call to the public?
Hi, once again, I'm Dan Aubrey at 3569 Barbary. I would like to know, can I speak on Tri-Bar still?
You can speak whatever's in your mouth.
Okay. How long would or could it have been if Tri-Bar were not to inform the city of this spill? Would it have been detected by means of however you detect these spills? Well, they wouldn't have known about the spill, but how often does the, well, that would be probably at the wastewater plant. Would they have found it there first before it got downstream?
It was mentioned during the presentation that staff at the wastewater treatment plant didn't notice that the pH levels were awry with the system, as well as coloring being off, and that would have probably been the investigation going from there from the city would have probably led to some determination of what was going on.
Before they contacted the city?
We had just started to clue into that and started to look into it, and by the time we were starting that process, they notified us later that day.
Yeah, so that was Monday afternoon.
Right.
So the potential is for any industrial plant in Wixom, if they do not contact the city by either because they don't know of the spill themselves yet, or they just want to try to hide it, that could potentially do a lot of damage before it gets to the wastewater plant or after. Potential's there.
Might as well.
Yeah, okay.
That's all I have, thank you.
Sure. I'd like to briefly address the question. We actually noted, the team noted the spill at, I think it was around 8 o'clock in the morning as we came in, and the pH, and we took a sample right away. It's a very unusual thing. So they're eyes on all the time, your team here. And wastewater treatment plants around the world are handling these very issues. Human mistakes happen, and they can supersede, in this case, 2 levels of safeguard that were in place. So perhaps a 3rd level of safeguard is sometimes warranted. But nonetheless, the treatment plant is robust.
I expect nothing less.
Yeah, very good.
Anybody else for the second call to the public? Seeing none, I'll close the second call to the public and move on to City Manager's comments. City Manager Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. So my city manager update, a couple of pieces of information in there. There's a lot of information about the Michigan Airline Trail Project. I won't go everything in its entirety, but there are a fair amount of information there. The pedestrian signals at Wixom Road and Old Wixom Road, I want to discuss that, the Hawk situation. We have, through both the trail manager as well as Tim Sickman, had conversations to ensure that the original commitment to have synchronization, if you will, between the Hawk and the traffic light at Pontiac Trail and Wixom is still the intent, and that will be incorporated in the implementation of the Hawk system to allow people to cross safely Wixom Road with a new trail extension on Phase 2. The other thing I'll say is things are proceeding in the downtown area with paving in the new section in front of the downtown businesses. driveway approaches have gone into place. There's still an additional one that still needs to be addressed, but will be addressed once that first driveway approach is cured. That would be on the property at AFC Hole Road. So things are moving along greatly. There's a lot of information there. The other item was related to the tri-bar discharge, which I don't think I need to cover any further based on most of that being covered during the presentation, as well as additional discussion that was held tonight. That's all the information that I was going to cover with the CMU. So, thank you.
Good. Assistant City Manager Benson, anything?
I do not.
Okay. We'll move on to council comments. Councilmember Grumman Fox.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
There you go. Councilmember Sharp.
Nothing, Mayor, thank you.
Councilmember Berman.
Now I feel bad for having a list. First things first, I did notice that she had to leave, but just to say my appreciation for the commitment that Nancy Dingleday has had to the city of Wixom. Obviously, I'm newer here and haven't had the opportunity to work with her as many of you. We don't have a crosswalk there yet. We need to put some barricades up. The fact that the concrete was opened and we didn't put some construction barricades up there to stop the people from crossing, we're just asking for someone to get killed. We need to put some barricades up, some signs directing people down to use the crosswalks we have until we can get a proper crosswalk installed there. Or unfortunately, my feeling is when someone does get hurt and killed there, that's going to be on us. I know I've talked about that previously, and it's disappointing to see that those approaches have been opened and there's no barricades there. If something can be done with that, I would really appreciate that. Not to continue to beat the dead horse in the tri-baller situation, I just hope that the continuing testing and the results from the testing can be updated on a daily basis on our website to our residents. So all of those results that are coming out from those 150 tests or whatever are continuing to be done. If we can continue to put that information out there so people can see that we're still testing and it's still coming back, hopefully negative. And if it's not negative, where it's testing positive so people at least know and we're being completely transparent with that information. And then lastly, I want to be able to end this meeting without giving my sincere appreciation to Ron Moore. Not one person in the city has reached out to me at the same level as Ron has done since I joined council. He has always been available by phone or text. Took the time to take me through the police department and all of his operations. I sincerely appreciate the time and the commitment that you put into this community, Ron, and I sincerely appreciate the commitment you put into me. So, I'll miss you.
Councilmember Smiley?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. A couple little things, just, yeah, it was wonderful seeing Nancy get that kind of recognition. I've learned a lot from Nancy, and she's an amazing lady. And then just wanted to, tell Steve and Tim and all your staff, and I'm sure there's a lot of different people that, jumped on this issue last week. I know you guys put in extra hours. You were great about updates to the community, to the council, and, to the public in general. And I just, I know it's ongoing and, nothing's wrapped up yet, but we're very happy with, how you guys handled this, and thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. I wanted to only wish outgoing Director of Public Safety Ron Moore well in his retirement and his new career as an educator. I hope he gets favorite classes in recess. So, I will definitely miss your friendship and your help to Wixom over the years that I've been up here. I know you've worked to keep Wixom safe and always had all of our residents' best interests at heart. as along the lines of social media. It's been a great way, especially when there have been tensions in other areas between community and police, to bridge that divide at times. So it's been very nice that you've been one of the local leaders on that front for folks in your position, or frankly any government position that isn't a congressman. So I think that Wixom is definitely a better city for all of the work that you've done. I know it's a place where everyone thinks we're relatively low crime or crime free because of your leadership. So I wish you well. Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mayor. Nancy, thank you again. I know you're gone now, but it was great. Great. I had a lot of fun on a lot of the projects over the years working with you, and I know you're still going to be around. And Nancy also made our daughter's wedding at Gibson Park very, very, very special, just by keeping up the grounds in that historical site, and it was very, very nice. So thank you. Ron, going to miss you as well. I don't have any social media, so I've never seen one of your posts. Don't know what they look like, but I hear they're great. But the personal contact and the use of the phone and face-to-face, you've always been very informative and always honest and open with communications, and the community has benefited from that. So good luck in your next endeavor. Maybe it won't be in recess, but maybe gym will be the favorite subject of your students. But anyway, and thank you, public, for coming out and speaking your mind, whether it was on the Tri-Bar situation or other issues. It's always refreshing to see government by the people for the people. So thank you.
So I just want to thank City Administration and Tim Sickma and the staff at F&V for all their hard work this past week, keeping us updated with this, and kudos for them to see something's going wrong before we get notified by Tri-Bi that there's been an issue. Appreciate that. Congratulations, well overdue for Nancy and everything she's done for the city, and I'm glad that the city could do something for her finally. And thank you to Cheryl Lucas for putting all the work in on that resolution. I really appreciate that. And Ron, we've been friends for a long time. We're still going to be friends, and I'm going to save most of my comments for next Wednesday. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Good night, everybody. Thanks for hanging.